As we are celebrating Father's Day, and we're starting celebrating Father's Day actually for 15 days from this Sunday until 2 weeks from Sunday. We're celebrating it by starting a new message series. It's called Dad Up. We're encouraging men to step up to the ways that they can make positive impacts and bless their families with their leadership and presence. It's been my experience that men really want to make a real difference in the world, that the things that we do as men really aim at wanting to do something that has a permanent impact, has a permanent place in the world. For example, we dream of big stuff. And I'm not saying that it's only boys who dream of this stuff, because I know the girls do too sometimes. In fact, one of my kids told me that she was looking forward to becoming a police firefighter. That's not quite right. What was it?
Firefighter, ballerina, stay-at-home mom.
Oh yeah, firefighter, ballerina, stay-at-home mom. I thought that was awesome. Like, what a combination.
She was 3.
She was 3, but I mean, she was dreaming big, right? And one of my kids recently said to me, it's kind of weird that people ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up, and expect there to be one answer to that. I want to be a lot of things. And I was like, my heart is so full. But boys tend to dream of being things like cowboys, and their independent nature, or soldiers, right? We talk about having that kind of courage. It was my son who wanted to know, what is courage? Does courage mean you're not afraid? He was relieved when I told him no. It means, and I was quoting Clint Eastwood here, but courage is being scared to death and saddling up anyway. Police officer. Kids want to be a police officer because they're tough and they're fighting crime and they're the good guys. And so on this Father's Day, we're getting started with this idea, this look at how dads can bless their families and can bless, in some cases, other families by demonstrating what it means to seek and offer forgiveness. So I'm just going to ask you to shout out, and I'm not going to pass the mic around, but just in 1 or 2 words, what do you want for your children when they grow up? Your sons or your daughters, or if your kids are already grown, your grandchildren, or nieces and nephews, nibblings, or whatever that it may be. What is it that you want for them? Go ahead and just shout it out. It's all right. You can talk in church. Happiness. Happiness. I heard peace, joy, and love. Those are good fruits of the Spirit. Caring. Yeah, we want them to care. We don't look around the world and say, I give a rip about this. I want to do something about this world. Right? I want to help this world. What else? Independence. Yes. We want them to be. Yes. We want them to be their own person. We don't want them to be the person that they see next to them. We don't want them to fall victim to keeping up with the Joneses or trying to please people. We want them to be who they are. What else? We want them to be safe, of course. I didn't see who said it, but it came from over here a little bit. Safety, definitely. We want our kids to live in a safe enough world that we can be confident that they're not going to get into any trouble or get hurt. I don't think we want it to be 100% safe, or otherwise we'd wrap them in bubble wrap and keep them at home. But safety is an important thing. Yeah. What else? Satisfaction. Ooh, there's a concept. There's a lot packed into that. Satisfaction with life and with the circumstances that they're in, which isn't necessarily to say that you want things to go well for them all the time.
And acceptance.
Mm-hmm. And a sense of acceptance. Absolutely. You guys have way more great ideas than the first service. First service is like, yeah, we got 4 things. We're done. I'm making fun of them because I can. They're not here. So, is it bad to talk about people behind their back? I guess it is. I shouldn't do that. What else, though? What else? I'm sure if we kept going, I would have had more answers. Generosity. We want them to have a generous spirit with their time, their money, with their kindness and love for people. Yeah, we don't want them to be walled off and say, closed fist towards the world. Know the Lord, absolutely. We want them to know what faith in Jesus Christ is. Definitely.
Learn the fruits of their labor.
Yes, we want them to learn that money comes from work. No, it doesn't grow on a tree. It doesn't come from mom and dad. Not forever, at least. Right? Yeah. Good. These are great answers. When I was thinking about this, I jotted down a few answers, and some that I wrote down that I didn't, some of your answers kind of touched on these, but one that I wrote down was toughness. I want to be mentally and physically tough. That doesn't mean I want them to be all bodybuilders, but I want them to be able to, I want them to be in good shape. I don't want them to make the mistake that I've made. It's a long road back once you've gotten overweight. Some of you know what I'm talking about. Some of you, I'm warning you. I'm just telling you. Out of my love for you, don't go there. Responsibility. We kind of touched on that. I want them to have a sense of responsibility, that they would follow through on their responsibilities. I want them to be the kind of people who say, that return the phone call and who show up when they said that they would. How about integrity? How about integrity, the basic idea of being the person that you said you were going to be. So this is something that I had written down. And these are good answers for sons and daughters and grandsons and granddaughters. But what I didn't write down, which is kind of ironic because I'm talking about it in the message today, it's our primary topic, but what I didn't write down, what none of you said, was to be forgiving. Isn't that interesting? And I think it's a hard topic to talk about sometimes. I think we realize that sometimes the question of forgiveness is a fraught topic. What I mean by that is that there's so much that you want to say, well, okay, but in this case and in that case, in this case and that case, and you want to say, you want to give people lots of leeway. And you want to say, you don't have to forgive right away. And I don't disagree with any of that. But forgiveness is so critical. To be a forgiving spirit. And that's what I really want to talk about today, because I think that while mothers and fathers have a lot to offer their families when it comes to forgiveness, and I don't want to downplay the role or value of women in that at all, I think that when men demonstrate to the kids in their lives, whether they're their kids or they're volunteering for the job, and show that they care about forgiveness, about seeking it when they've been wrong and offering it when it's requested of them, that they make a tremendous impact upon the character of their children. That's kind of my thesis for the day. I think forgiveness is a hard topic to talk about, especially for men. It's not easy for us to talk about forgiveness, and I think the reason is that our culture values toughness, the Rough Rider kind of thing. I'm not saying that girls don't play war, because in my house they totally do. And cowboys and Indians and detective and all that sort of thing. That absolutely happens in my house, and we don't put any barriers on what kid can play with what toy and that sort of thing. But the movement towards trying to make the play of boys less aggressive, I think, it doesn't work. There's been studies have you heard about this trend? And maybe some of you do this. I'm not picking on you if you do this, but if you have kids and some people are concerned that by playing the games, like playing Cowboys and Indians, playing gun games, I'm going to shoot you, that sort of thing, that we are encouraging kids to settle their problems with violence. And so some people have responded to that, not our family, but some people have responded to that by saying they're not going to have gun toys. So they're against gun toys, and they don't let their kids play with kids who do the gun toy thing. Don't raise your hand. I'm not trying to single you out, but if you've done that, you've done it for a reasonable reason. You want your kids to be well-adjusted, kind, polite, and not turn into violence as their first answer to every question. But if you study a group of boys that you never do gun play with, you never do gun toys with, and you just set them to playing in a park or something like that, and you watch long enough, what you'll find is that anything can be a gun if you're creative. Running around and pretending you have a gun and throwing wood chips at each other is an option. But, taking a stick and breaking it so that it's like roughly the right end and it's got two little forks that can be like a rifle butt. I mean, they will find a way to play with guns, whether you like it or not. But I think as a consequence of that, because our culture teaches men to value aggression and toughness, to be hard-hearted, to be able to bear up under things, to be quiet about it, to shut up and take your lumps, to pay your dues. Because we focus that kind of language, in my opinion, unhelpfully, upon boys and young men, it's hard for us to talk about things which are softer. It's hard for us to talk about forgiveness when the guys around you want to talk about what they would do to get them back. Oh, if somebody did that to my family, I'd do this and that and this and that. No, you wouldn't. You're a coward, but it's okay. You can talk it up that way. You're not going to follow through with that. but I understand where it comes from. It comes from a sense of wanting to be tough enough. So talking about softer things, talking about things like being loving, being affectionate with children, being willing to sacrifice for others. That's something we can get our heads around. But the idea of being able to sacrifice in a way that doesn't involve like money or blood, or sometimes both, that's harder for us to get our heads around. And many of us encourage that attitude in boys from the earliest days. Kids, little boys get camouflage stuff and gun toys, and little girls don't. Unless you're our girls, in which case they don't care. They swap hats anyway. And so because of that, I think it's hard for us to talk about this. So I'm going to break the silence on this a little bit. I'm going to talk about the need for forgiveness. Now, I wish I had one of my kids here as a visual aid. I had Annalise with me at the first service today, and she sat right here in the front row, and without missing a beat, I asked her the question, what does fair mean? And she didn't even miss a beat. She just said, fair is everybody gets what they need. That's not the definition of fair most people use. That's the one we use in our family. We'd like to understand the world as just and basically fair. But in our culture, we're taught that while justice may be blind, justice is not always available, and so we have to struggle for justice. It's not wrong, but a lot of us see the world, therefore, as a zero-sum game, that's an economics term, but the idea of a zero-sum game is that everything has to add up to zero at the end of the day. If you advance, I lose something. You gain, I lose. If I win, you're going to lose. If you play checkers with somebody, what are your options? Win, lose, draw, or flip the board in anger and run away, right? But there's no situation in which you both win. Even a draw is a half a loss for both, or a half a win, depending if you're one of those optimists or pessimists. And while I think that most of us would happily advance the value of forgiveness to the people that we love, and we're really pretty good at caring for family and friends. I know a lot of you. You guys care about your family. You care about your friends. If somebody calls you up and asks you to help them move, you'll do it. You might grumble a little bit beforehand, but you'll do it. But by and large, these are for people who already like you, maybe have done some nice things for you, and things that you're comfortable with. On the other hand, one of the most challenging things that Jesus ever told somebody in our culture isn't things like, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. I think that should challenge us, but I don't think we struggle with it. It's not love your neighbor as yourself, because we like to define neighbor as the people that we like, that speak like us and look like us and live next door to us. The challenging one, the one that we skip over, that we don't want to think about in our culture, in our community, is love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. And we don't take it seriously, first of all, because we believe that in this country that we're persecuted, which is utter nonsense. Practically no one in this country has any idea what persecution actually is. But also because we would say, no, of course you don't have to love your enemies. Jesus was just exaggerating. He didn't really mean it. Of course not. Because we need to find some way of explaining away something that we really don't want to hear. We'd like to understand the world is just and basically fair, and that we have to struggle to get what we want. But if we do that over against other people, we will get what we want, and that is a good thing. So it's hard for us to talk about things like generosity and gratitude. It's hard for us to talk about things like forgiveness. It's difficult to set boundaries with children. I've found that in my experience. Jennifer and I have. Are there limits to our love? And I would say, well, no, of course there's no limits to my love of my children. There's nothing that they could do that would ever separate me and them when it comes to my bond of love with them. I love my children. I would do anything for them, and I'd like to believe I mean that. But there's also a way in which sometimes the actions that we take are enabling bad behavior. There is a such thing as, in the name of love, giving a drunk a drink, giving somebody more of what they don't need. And so we struggle and we wrestle with questions of what does it mean to forgive? And where's the line where love must come to an end and we say no more? In order to wrestle with this question in the context of what God says in the Bible, we are going to use a very famous passage of Scripture. It's called the parable of the prodigal son. It's a little longer than what we usually tackle, but I won't be making quite as much commentary as we go through it. It's actually a pretty easy read. And I think that this story points us to what it means to be connected to God and what God's love is like for us. It could easily be called, it's called the parable of the prodigal son, and prodigal means, spendy. Somebody who spends prodigally or gives prodigally is giving away things like crazy. But maybe it's the father who's prodigal and giving things away without regard to the cost. Possibly another name for this parable would be the parable of the loving father. And so today we're in the book of Luke, Gospel of Luke, chapter 15, starting at verse 11. If you have your Bible with you, feel free to get that out and read along. If you'd like to follow along on your tablet or your phone, you can go to sog.church/Bible, and we'll open you right to the right page. So we're starting at verse 11, and Jesus said, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the share of the property that will belong to me.' So he divided his property between them." A quick note. Coming to your father and saying, "Eventually I'm going to inherit this, give it to me anyway," in that culture, that would be a very rude thing to do in our culture. In that culture, that was akin to saying, "Dad, I wish you were dead." Really, really inappropriate. A few days later, the younger son gathered all that he had and traveled to a distant country, and there he squandered his property in dissolute living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed the pigs. He would gladly have filled himself with their pods that the pigs were eating, and no one gave him anything. So this is a kid who started off on a bad road and now he's hit rock bottom. No good Jewish boy is going to voluntarily and happily go and work for a Gentile pig farmer. There are so many things that are wrong with that. He is not in his country. He is working for a Gentile. He is, basically he is almost a slave because he doesn't have any choices. That's the only place he can work, so he has to do what the guy says. And on top of that, his job is to slop pigs, which are an unclean animal. So basically, as long as he works there, he is going to be permanently, ritually unclean. That is a very bad situation. And one day he looks up, and he kind of has this epiphany, and says, when he came to himself, he said, "How many of my father's hired hands have bread enough and to spare, but here I am dying of hunger." He realized when he was looking at the food that he was throwing in front of the swine, that was starting to look pretty good. And he realized, man, I've fallen pretty far. The prodigal son is a famous story because the prodigal son moves out and burns down every important relationship he has. He tells his dad, "You're dead to me. I want the money from the inheritance now so I can go and do what I want to do. I'm tired of being in your household. I never want to see you again. Go die. Please, quickly." He tells his older brother, "I don't want to see you ever again. I just want to take my money and run." And then he takes off, and after not too much time, he gets the end of his money. And so here he is thinking, okay, I'm out of money. I burned down every important relationship in my life. I am literally hitting rock bottom when it comes to my spiritual state because of where I am and what I'm doing for a living. I am totally and completely screwed. But I remember that my dad is a good guy to work for. So if I go home and I humble myself before my father and apologize, maybe my dad will be merciful enough to me, even though I don't deserve to be his son anymore, because I told him I would be better off if you were dead. Maybe he would at least give me a job and I could afford to eat. So he starts dreaming this up. Verse 18, "I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you.'" This is correct. "I am no longer worthy to be called your son." Absolutely true. "Treat me like one of your hired hands." We'll see. So he set off and went to his father. Now, let's remember, father has every reason to be angry. He probably was at the beginning. And so the father has a couple of choices. His first choice is he can do the just thing, the right thing to do, which is to tell this unloving and undeserving kid to go take a hike. He already gave him a significant chunk of his property, and he squandered it. Or he could do the generous thing and give him a job, which is what this kid is counting on. He's thinking, man, if I can just get back to Dad, he'll give me a job, and at least I won't have much, and I won't be his son anymore, but at least I'll have something. But while he was still far off, before the apology, just as he's coming down the road, the father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. Then the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. And Dad interrupts. But the father said to his slaves, quickly, bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger, which is a symbol of being a son and having the authority of the father. Put sandals on his feet, and get the fatted calf that we've been keeping for a special celebration. This calf that we've been being really good to it. We're giving it the best food. We're taking really good care of it because it's going to be really delicious. Get the fatted cat and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. It's party time. My son's home. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to celebrate. The father doesn't choose the just thing and blast him, even though the kid totally deserved it. He doesn't choose the generous thing and gave him a job and tolerated and put up with him. He chose the remarkable thing. He chose to be forgiving, even though the kid deserves it not at all. And he makes the decision to forgive before he begins to run, before he even sees his face up close, before he realizes that he's there to apologize, before he hears one word. The father decides to meet him on the road. It wasn't the expected response. It wasn't tough. It wasn't hard. It wasn't merely generous. It was remarkable. It's what we call grace. It doesn't depend on the apology. You notice he never even let the kid finish. He never even got the opportunity to ask for what he foolishly thought he could possibly get. And it doesn't depend on how sorry he looks. Frankly, the kid never really says that he's sorry. He just says that, he's not worthy to be called his son. He tells him the truth, but he's not really expressing a lot in the way of sorrow. He doesn't seem to be sorry so much as hungry. But somehow for the father it's enough. But that's not the end of the story. We continue at verse 25. Now, the father's elder son was in the field. And when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. So by the way, older brother, while you were out being a good kid, doing the right thing and watching the sheep, the family's throwing a party for your deadbeat younger brother who squandered a significant chunk of the family fortune and who has come back hungry. I can kind of sympathize with the older brother. So he calls one of the slaves and he asks what's going on, and he replies, your brother has come and your father has killed the fatted calf because he's gotten him back safe and sound. Then he became angry and refused to go in. His father came out and began to plead with him, but he answered his father, listen, for all these years I've been working like a slave for you, and I have never disobeyed your command, and yet you have never even given me so much as a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, not my brother, came back, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, hold up, who said that? You killed the fatted calf for him. And I just point that out because the elder brother has got quite an imagination. We know that the younger brother spent all that money, all that stuff in dissolute living, but we don't get any details. But elder brother's got quite the imagination. He knows exactly what he must have been up to with all that money. And he chooses to hold a grudge. Dads, uncles, grandpas, it is so easy for us to hold grudges. And while we might think, well, I'm not holding a grudge against my family, I'm not holding a grudge against my kids, I tenderly forgive them when they apologize, and I try to teach them that. When you hold a grudge against somebody else, your kids are watching. And Mom, that's true for you too. And if you want to see what tough looks like, just look at a guy who is fighting righteous anger. Not only is he mad, but actually he's right about it. Not just that he believes it, but other people would confirm that, Yes, that person totally cut you off on the highway. Righteous anger is dangerous because we begin to think that whatever we do in the name of righteous anger is justifiable. And we hold a grudge, and with that, holding a grudge is 2 minutes or 2 hours or 2 decades. Holding a grudge teaches the children around you how to react. He says, this son of yours may still be your son, but he is not my brother. He put himself out of the family and made himself miserable because he was holding a grudge. He wouldn't go into the party. He couldn't celebrate. Last 2 verses. Then the father said to him, son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. In other words, if you thought that you were working like a slave because someday I die and you get to have this, it's already yours. It's already yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice because this brother of yours, because he is still your brother, this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found. See, the father understood that there was a difference between fair and just. Just is equal, right? Everybody gets the same. Sometimes my kids, when it suits them, my kids really like that definition of fair. Everybody gets the same thing. But sometimes fair means everybody gets what they need. And while there's nothing about what the father did that was deserved, the younger brother didn't deserve that. It was what he needed, and he chose to respond in love. What he learned was that forgiveness matters most when it is deserved least. And he offers something almost impossible. Forgiveness. Not for a small crime, not for an insult, not for running away from home, but for wishing his father dead and acting as if it was true. And by giving that impossible forgiveness, he receives something that he cannot put a price on. Something even more impossible. A relationship with his kid. I want you to realize, this is not just a story about 2 fictional characters that Jesus told 2,000 years ago. But this is a story that points to the love of God directed to you. You see, because when we put ourselves into the story, we want to put ourselves in the judgment seat. We want to say that we're the father sitting on the porch, and one day the kid comes running down the lane towards our house, and we have to make a decision what we're going to do. And yeah, it's true that we oftentimes do have to make the decision. What are we going to do when it comes to forgiveness? Are we going to forgive people? Are we going to hold a grudge? Are people going to see that? Are our children going to see the way that we hard-heartedly show them that tough means don't forgive them because they don't deserve it? Tough means don't trust them because they aren't like us. Tough means be afraid of them and be wary of them because they're an enemy and we don't like or love our enemies. It's not just a question of how the kids learn from us in that way, but also it's a question of where we put ourselves in the story. Because more often than not, you aren't sitting on the porch. You are not dead, Dad, and the decision to forgive is not about you at all. This is intended to be a picture of what God's love and forgiveness is. The love of God the Father is what motivates his work in history to save. Because God doesn't want to punish you. God doesn't want to merely be sort of generous and tolerate you. He wants you to be his child. He wants you to be his heir. He wants you to be part of his kingdom. He wants to live with you forever in blessedness and righteousness. He wants you to be a new creation by the Holy Spirit. He wants you to be resurrected and brought into the eternal company of all the saints in light. He wants you to lose your grip on the anger that possesses you, on the need to be hard and tough and right, and to release that instead, to turn loose of grudges and pain and the anger that still holds on to us. You see, because whether you're the goody two-shoe kid who's always been in church and you've always done the right thing, and you've never done anything, you never speed because that's illegal, and we don't do things that are illegal. If you're one of those people, and I don't know if there's anybody like that in this room or not, but if you relate more to the older brother, hey, I've done it right, and I've watched the people around me do it wrong, I get it. It's easy to feel self-righteous, but you're the older brother in this story, being invited into the joy of finding that there are people who have lived that way and have turned from it, and we can rejoice because God has opened up a door in their life. And if you're more like the younger brother, where you took all the blessings that God had to give you and you squandered them on dissolute living, and the people around you think they know what you've been doing, and they think they can judge you because of it, you're still more like a son in this story than like the father. And you can come down that lane. You can be welcomed and treated as a son and an heir, to wear a robe and sandals, to have the signet ring that represents the authority of the Father, to be gathered together into a feast celebrating that you were once lost and are found. You were once dead and you have come to life. Dads and moms, don't miss this. The way that you react to the hurts around you teaches your children more than you could possibly realize about what it means to relate to people for life. My prayer for you this week is that knowing that God is motivated, that the cross is motivated by the love of the Father for you, that you would be a new creation in Christ each day, and that you would let the new life of God by the Holy Spirit live inside of you, so that when the people around you, be they your kids or your nephews or your nieces or your grandkids or your siblings or your parents or whoever it is who looks at you, they say, man, something's different about you. You're not holding on to that like you once did. What's different? That new life is worth it. In Jesus' name, amen. We've come to the point in our service where we are going to look at our bulletin. So I'm going to ask you to get those out at this time. If you manage to sneak in without getting a bulletin, or you need something to write with, please raise your hand, and a member of our First Impressions team would be happy to provide that to you this morning. On the guy with the muscles that look like mine, that side of the bulletin, down at the bottom. What are you laughing about? Don't you laugh, Giggles.
Your wife laughing.
Yeah, but I can't yell at her. I can yell at you. If I yell at her, I'll get hurt.
Forgiveness.
Thank you. Performative contradiction. I understand. I definitely did something wrong there. All right. So on the side that says response card, please let us know that you were here today to share this experience with us. We'd appreciate that. If you are joining us online this morning, you can fire up the Spirit of Grace app, or fire up the Spirit of Grace app, and that will take you to a place where you can go to the response card. It's in the Connect section. When you get to service at the end of the day, please serve at 10:33. Flip it over to the back. We've got a couple more things to ask. First of all, a reminder, we're still in Power Up Kids. We're having a lot of fun. The theme today was I will be humble, so I went down there and I was the most humble man in the world. Yeah, right. I went down there and said, I'm the best person in this room, and I want you all to know it. And they were like, what? We had a lot of fun. They're really enjoying Power Up. I hope you know that. The announcements here are important, but I want to direct your attention to the bottom here above the fold where it says, this week I will encourage this boy or man in my life. Maybe that's a son, a grandson, a nephew. Maybe that is your husband. Maybe that is your significant other. Maybe that is your father. But who is it in your life this week who needs some encouragement from you? I'm writing down Peter's name because Peter and I have to stick together. I got 4 daughters and 1 son. Peter and I have to be like this. Below the fold, I've got a couple questions for you. First of all, if we can pray for you in any way, let us know in the prayer request section. If you need that kept private, check the box. My question I'd like you to share an answer with me this week for is this. The man who's made the biggest positive impact on my life is who?
Who's made the biggest positive, what man has made the biggest positive impact on your life? Maybe that's a dad or a grandpa. Maybe that's somebody who wasn't actually a dad but played one on TV. Maybe that is a teacher. There's a lot of different possibilities there. Maybe it's somebody you know at work who's really been a mentor. I'm going to write down my dad because I learned some important things from him. And he's made a really positive impact on my life. Happy Father's Day, Dad, if you're watching. Somebody's got to like my videos. But, the two things that he did that really made an impact to me is he always showed me that even though he wasn't always excited about me and my choices, he always loved me. And so he'd say things like, man, I hate teenagers. I'd be like, Dad, I'm a teenager. He's like, yeah, I know. I love you, but I hate teenagers. And I understood what he meant. But the thing he said that I think is more and more true every year is he said to me, remember, kid, the older that you get, the smarter I'll get. The older that you get, the smarter I'll get. And I realized that that's absolutely true because maybe, as I grew into adulthood and I began to have to pay bills and get married and have kids and have some responsibilities in the world, I realized that maybe the old man wasn't quite as stupid as I thought he was. He's taught me a lot, and I'm grateful for it. While you're finishing up your response cards, I just want to remind you, next week we are going to be continuing this series, 2 more weeks. The second way we're going to talk about is in diligence in pursuing righteousness. If you want your kids to do the right thing, they need to see you do the right thing. And we are going to talk about that more and in greater depth, so I hope that you'll be back. Also, if you'd like to grab an invite card on the way out the door and invite a friend to join you, I think this will be good for everybody, not just men. Finally, when you finish your response cards, tear it off the bottom of your bulletin, and you can return that in the offering. Which I forgot to do. You can return that in the offering, and we'll collect that in just a minute. Let's pray. Gracious God, we thank you for the gift of the men in this room and the gift of the men in our lives who have made a positive impact on us. Lord, it's hard for us to be people who are soft towards people that the culture tells us to be hard towards. It's hard for us to be forgiving and talk about what it means to be loving and offer grace. But we pray that you would move our spirits so that the young people around us, the boys and girls around us who see our living might learn from our example and become people of forgiveness and grace and peace. Help us and all fathers, Lord, in their vocation, their calling, and help them to follow you in Jesus' name. Amen.